to another Sci-Fi Fantasy Saturday. Now on these Sci-Fi Fantasy Saturdays, I try to stay close to home. I try to cover war games or fantasy war games or sci-fi war games, but I get a little far afield sometimes. But today, I'm coming closer to home. Today I'm going to talk to you about Dungeons & Dragons Conquest of Nerath board game. This is a fantasy war game, for lack of a better term. This is a dudes on the map type game or risk-like game, and you're going to have minis that move along the map, fight each other, and you're going to win based on your conquest and, in this case, of other ways of collecting points. This is going to have a victory point track. So let's take a look at the map. This is the world of Nerath, which I believe part of this might have been in the Forgotten Realms setting, and then part of this, I think, was maybe the part of the 4th edition D&D. I don't keep up with D&D as much over the years, but I know this has been the source of some settings and the source of some modules or dungeons, as the case may be. So you might see like the Tomb of Horrors here. There's White Plum Mountain down here, the Forbidden City. I think some of these might be some settings in the D&D world. But you have your victory point track here, so each of the nations are going to be keeping track of victory points as they move along the map and take over areas or go into dungeons and the like. I said this is a dudes on the map type game because here are your dudes. There's a really nice minis that come with the game. There's 4 different factions that are vying for control in this world, and there's different units for each of the factions and different abilities for each of the factions, and you're going to be keeping track of them on the board with the minis. Now the minis look pretty good. Some of the counters, this is something that is kind of common with some of the D&D games or the publishers that came out at the time. The counters are very thin, and you can see little nubs on them and everything like that. This is basically a control counter. It'll keep track of your victory points on here, but it also keep track of what areas you're going to control on the board for each of the different faction. You get lots of dice here because each of the different units use different dice for combat. The combat's relatively basic. You need to roll a 6+ for a hit. Does that sound familiar? A little risk-like there. And some units get to roll, a 20-sided die, so you're going to have a much greater chance to hit. And then the monsters, do that as well, and we'll talk about that in a second. So there's your dudes that go on the map, or there's your units, and you'll have these reference cards here, which for each of the different factions that kind of tell you your sequence and play, your battle sequence. You'll have your event and your discard here. This on the back side of it, this is your setup, for each of your different areas, your base income, starting treasury. One of the weird things here is for these reference cards for the different empires. It's okay because you have your setup, and then you're going to flip it over, and this is going to be your reference card with your events and your discard. But the weird thing here for the quick reference card talks about the different the land type, cost, attack die, move, and everything, and all that quick reference information. But on the back is the actual card to keep track of the treasure cards and the dungeons and in gold and stuff like that, and your victory conditions. Okay, well, it's kind of hard to use something when you have to keep flipping it over. So how can you put something on here and then look at this as a reference? So kind of a misstep there. Counterstock is okay on those. You have, as I said, you have 4 different empires. You have the Iron Circle. You're going to have the Valen Alliance. And, of course, I probably mispronounced some of these because I did not live in those worlds back at that time. You have the Dark Empire of Kargoth, and you have the Nerathian League. So you got 4 different empires. Now they're going to have different units that are going to have like different abilities, but it's basically a mix of these: either foot soldier, siege engine, fighter, wizard, monster, castle, storm elemental, dragon, or warship. Each of the empires is going to have some mix of that, but they're going to have like a different mix of that. Really, where the uniqueness comes in for each of the different empires is in the event deck, because you're going to draw from the event deck every turn, and that event deck is basically and it's unique to each of the different empires, and it's kind of like a spells, right? It's something that you get, and then you get to play it at certain times. So special abilities for each of the different empires. Like here, you can play it, and it tells you when you can play it. Each enemy dragon in the battle takes 1 damage. So they do different things here. Play just before you roll Nerath Wizard's attack die. The wizard attack roll is an automatic 10. So stuff like that. So there's different, and each of these events are different for each of the different factions. So this is really where you get some of your, not only you get some of a different situation based on where you set up, because where your units start is going to dictate somewhat of what your strategy is and what you can take, or what you're close to, or what you want to go for. But the events change that as well, because they're going to give you some special abilities. If I recall, when I was at the Kargoth. Was it the Kargoth? The Dark Empire of Kargoth, and I think they have some like teleporting abilities, because that came into play when I used that quite a bit when I played them. But I think they have some ability to teleport, I believe, and so that was could do some surprise attacks and stuff like that. So that's a unique thing about this, is that you're getting some unique flavor and asymmetrical abilities by these events that you collect. I think you draw 1 a turn, and then you can collect those and go into use those throughout the game. Now you also have dungeons in here, and those are populated with these right here, these little dungeon tiles here, which these counters came out okay. They're rounded. There's a little bit of nibs on them, but still not the thickest. And you're going to be populating your dungeons wherever they may be on the board. And in order to enter into a dungeon, you need to have a hero. Everybody has a hero character. One of the little minis on the board will be their hero, and you need that to go into the dungeons. And when you go into the dungeons, you're basically going to see what you fight. Like here's a Hydra, so it has 3 8-sided dice that it's going to roll, and again, it hits on a 6+. Its reward is you get 2 gold. And I think the number of dice on there is the number of hits, if I'm not mistaken. So you'd have to score 3 hits on that to take it out. But there's all kinds of different monsters, as you can look in here. And so that's interesting. 8 and a 12. And some that sometimes are especially like first strike, so this rolls a 20 and it gets first strike. So the Medusa is going to go first, so you need to be careful of that. So this really gives you it's not just your simple, risk or dudes on the map where you're just moving in territories and trying to marshal enough forces to take the other side out and to take over more territory. You're also, have this ability to go into dungeons and get rewards through that. So it feels like, Dungeons and Dragons in that regard. And if anybody's ever played Dungeons and Dragons, or at least when I started playing Dungeons and Dragons, I thought that was interesting. You didn't think anything of it, that you're going in from one dungeon to the next. You're just, hey, I'm just jumping into dungeons, and why do we have all these dungeons? Who's maintaining these? So I know that the better the dungeon master, the better the stories are weaved together and to make a link. But I felt like there was a lot of dungeon hopping, and why do you have those dungeons? So this is interesting that you have it in this world, and it kind of fits into the play where you're moving your armies and you say, well, I need to get something, or there's something I might want to try to get out of a dungeon. So you'll go to and it's right next to your area, so you might explore a dungeon and see what you can get there. So that's a lot of the game. If you have multiple pieces, because some of these areas are relatively small, you put the again, like Axis and Allies, I think is the first place where I saw this, where you have put these little chits or poker chips down, and then you can put your unit on top of that to indicate how many of those units that you have on the board. There's also I'm being remiss, there's also treasure cards that you get, and they're going to be and I think that's going to come from dungeons as well. And these are a little bit extra, tell you when you can play it, what the power is, and tells you how many victory points. So again, that's one reason why one reason why dungeons are important, because it does give you victory points as well as you're moving along the board here. Here's the Rod of Resurrection, and it's going to have some special ability, and again has some victory points. Here's teleportation circles, just all kinds of stuff that you have here. So it really does, it's a little bit more. There's the Eye of Vecna, have to have that. There's a lot of thematic, or it really does add in some of the D&D theme to this whole world. If you've played any of the D&D settings that use some of the things from this world, then that's probably even an added plus to this. Played this with my son quite a bit back in the day, and we enjoyed it. It was interesting. It was a little bit, it's definitely a step up from Risk in that it's giving you a little bit more feel of fantasy and theme of that, with a little bit more options. The unique play of the events was interesting and allowed you to kind of make different kind of decisions. The unique setup going into dungeons, it really immersed you could immerse yourself into this world and kind of figure out some of the unique things that were going on. Now, it's not too in depth. Again, this is probably not as complicated as Axis and Allies, but a step up from Risk. But it's still very accessible. Now, I don't know if you can still get this game, but we liked it, and especially liked the fantasy theme to it. The rule book is fine. You have your rule summary on the back telling you about your units here. You've got a glossary of terms. It's color. It's relatively easy to get through. I mean, it looks like it's a lot of rules, but it's really there's examples in there to telling you what you do. But again, the big issue here is there's the risk-like combat where you have to roll 6+. The unique addition is having the different types of die or the different number of sides, because that's how shows you the strength of the different units or the creatures, because again, you're trying to roll on a 6+, and so this is like you're going to have a more opportunity or much better chance on a 20-sided die to do that. Anyway, so that's what I have for you all today, is the Conquest of Nerath. Thought it would be a nice little episode for Sci-Fi Fantasy Saturday. Love to know your thoughts on this. If any of you played this game, or a lot of the different factions have dragons, or have some huge units there. Like to know if any of you guys played this or have this, and what do you think about it? Is this something worth your while? As I said, the minis aren't bad. They're not. I mean, they're not. I don't paint, and I don't even know if you would want to paint these, but they're all different. They're all the color of their faction, so you really don't need to paint them. But I'd love to know what you guys think about this. Is this something that it's cool, good dragon there? Is this something that that you like, didn't like, or you went from Risk right on to something a little bit heavier? You also had some like strongholds and siege equipment and stuff. So, as I said, there was some cool stuff here to play around with. Again, some of the counters and markers aren't all that great, but the minis were fine. The dungeons were fine. The cards started curling up a little bit. The quality of these cards, over time, they kind of curl up a little bit, but all very, very playable. So again, love to hear your thoughts. What do you think about this? What do you think about Dungeons and Dragons? If any of you play Dungeons and Dragons, I know there's quite a few people that have got into wargaming via Dungeons and Dragons. I am one of those, and love to know what anybody has to say about any of that. But most importantly, hey, thanks for stopping by on this Saturday. Love to have you stop by, spend some time. I greatly appreciate it. Drop a comment, start a discussion, and have a great day. Thanks for watching.